all to arrive. Thank you for joining us once more at the Virtually Agile Meetup. We're looking for a great session from a Miro expert today, someone who's been using Miro since 2011, so before me, because I only began using it in like 2016 or something when it was real-time board. We're going to be learning about facilitating product decisions today. Shipra is here to tell you about that, to share with you on that topic. I'm going to allow Shipra to share her screen, and she will introduce you far better than I. Over to you.
All right, thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone. I'm really Chris and actually Fred, like with Chris to like organize this community at a conference. I was telling you, Chris, I come from the design world, so I think it's helpful to know a little about me before I delve into the topic, just so you know where I'm coming from and what kind of, you can ask me and then you can ask each other. I hope to have a bit of a conversation today. But I come from the design world here. Product manager, I built and led product teams in Silicon Valley for 20 years. And as sort of an immigrant, I moved to the US about 20 years ago. And I always felt, when I first moved to the US and started my first job at Oracle, I remember always feeling a little bit like an outsider, like an outsider, like I didn't really feel comfortable using my voice. And I realized pretty quickly that being at headquarters in Silicon Valley, in a product role, I was actually the insider. And then all of the folks that we were working with that were in distributed offices that were outside of like our Redwood City, Silicon, they were the voices that weren't being heard. So like people in some of our offices across the US or even some of our offices, what used to happen was like we used to make a lot of our product decisions at headquarters in like Redwood City or San Francisco. And then those decisions would be broadcasted. And then a lot of sort of the satellites were just sort of implementing, they were executing the tasks. And I suddenly I realized wait, I'm not the outsider, I'm the insider here. And then I saw all the sort of issues with not having sort of deep alignment and having this transactional task-based relationship with parts of the team and having other parts of the team be highly privileged at HQ. So that's why actually, as Chris said, that's why I kind of found Miro back in 2011. I was one of the first 1,000 users of Miro in the day. And throughout my career since then, I've been sort of looking for ways to ensure that we create level playing fields where we hear every voice, hear every idea before we make a decision. And then once we make a decision, that teams are aligned and move forward. So that's how I started using Miro. And over the years, I've been developing frameworks and ways of working for my teams that support this type of sort of fully aligned teams that make decisions together. And that's what brings me here to you all to share a little bit of what I've learned, some of the frameworks, and see if I can help you redesign one of your upcoming meetings. So if you have, as I kind of go through, this is a lot of it is kind of presentation-y, maybe 20 minutes of content in there. We'll pause at various points. We'll try and do some exercises. I was saying, if you have a piece of paper and a pen, keep it next to you. We'll do some drawings and some exercises along the way. If you have questions, just post them in chat, and then I'll make sure I pause. This is a small, intimate group. Just pause at various points, and we can have a little bit of a discussion or reflection on what I'm saying. So any questions before I kind of move on? Hope you all can see my screen. Yes, I think you can. Okay, amazing. So students. And I'll try and keep an eye on chat, but Chris, you have an eye on chat. Just feel free to interrupt me. I'm not going to be offended. Just interrupt if there's something timely that we should answer. Okay, so I want to talk to you about facilitating product decisions. I think most people here in this call, I assume you all are Agile coaches or work in sort of Agile ways. So you're probably used to hearing the word facilitator, rotation. And when I think of facilitator, I'm really thinking of someone who helps to bring about an outcome. So how do you help a team come together and make decisions and move forward, like move the product forward. And so when I talk about facilitating, this is what I'm talking about, is like moving products. And in my kind of world, when I think about like facilitating decisions, a lot of decision making happens in meetings, not always, but most of it does happen in meetings. And like there are three things that I'm thinking about when I need to get a team to make some decisions or to make some forward movement. So when I'm planning a meeting, I'm thinking about like, do I have the right people, the right sequence, which is the right agenda, the right design of the meeting, and then the right conclusion. Like, can we actually make a conclusion that moves us forward? So as I talk about this, so when I say the right people, let me. I think a lot of you have probably heard this, and I've seen this very true in my career. Like, if you were actually going to do the work in a meeting, we can't have too many people in the room. So I'm looking for 6 to 8, or sometimes people. And by diverse, I don't mean like diversity in like race, gender, sexual orientation, or some of those like sort of demographic or psychographic factors, but also diverse in their roles at the company. So when I'm like kind of, and maybe I can draw this, my suggestion is that you have like a couple of people that are sort of the builders. So the people building whatever decision you make, like the people who are going to actually be implementing or executing those decisions, can need like a couple of people from that room. You probably need one person or maybe a couple of people that are close to the customer, so they are close to insights. A lot of times it's like analytics, marketing, user research, sales, customer success. So anyone that's like close to sort of the problem. And then I always kind of within that two pizza team, I like to have this person decider. And I got this verbiage from Jake Knapp's book about design sprints, and I really liked it. But you can call it, I don't know, decider can sometimes feel a little hierarchical, I think. Like it's not very West Coast, it just seems very hierarchical East Coast sort of a concept. But at the end of the day, what I mean by, you could call it a tiebreaker or whatever you want, but at the end of the day, there's usually one person that can derail a project or that has the authority and the responsibility to make sure that and I like to make sure that person who has like the most authority is in the room, because sometimes without that person, teams make the least risky decisions, right? So a lot of times teams, like everyone's trying to like cover their ass and like trying to make decisions that won't get them in trouble. Whereas generally I find like this decider type persona can help the team be more confident and bold and take more risks and then feel more confident after the meeting. Also, if you don't have the decider in the meeting and you don't have sort of understanding that they have the responsibility to give the team the go ahead to help make this decision final, then you could have this meeting, you could make a decision, and then 2 weeks later, this person might come back and like say, no, I don't agree, or I've thought more deeply about it, and I don't think this is the right direction. And so like your project is going to get derailed and your decision wasn't like, it's not going to stick, and it's just more churn for the team. So I like having sort of the decider in the room. So that's generally what I mean when I say diverse team. Like you want some builders, you want some people that are close to the customer or the problem, and then you want at least like the single person that is kind of most responsible. And usually it usually ends up being the person. So I'll kind of move forward a little bit, and then I'll pause at some point, and then we can discuss it, because I know this tends to be controversial sometimes. But once you have the right people in the room, what do you do? And I feel like every meeting, or a good, well-facilitated meeting, it has the same shape in my mind as like a design process. And the shape is one where you diverge and converge. right? So you make choices and you create choices and you make choices. And the reason I think this is like a lot of times like meetings, and you guys have been, you've probably seen it. A lot of times a meeting is like a presentation. It's like a long presentation. And then at the end, you're like, anyone have any questions? And then like the hippo like speaks up. You all know what happens in most meetings, right? It's like just one long presentation. And those can just be pre-reads. I would say like those don't need to be meetings. It can be like a Loom video or whatever that you send out that people can watch comments to. But if you're kind of bringing for a meeting, hopefully each of the people you're bringing in the room has something to add to this decision. And so you need sort of that diverging moment. So this is like what I would say, like a well-facilitated meeting starts with context, maybe like no more than 5 minutes, right? Send it as a pre-read if it takes more than 5 minutes, but context of here's where we are. And when I'm designing a meeting, I always think about the context and the conclusion. So where do I want to be at the end? What do I want to have at the end of the meeting that I don't have before the meeting starts? So I always start from the end, like imagining like, okay, we have like this successful session. Like, what do I want to come out of it? And I draw that and I sketch that out. And then I look at, well, where are we now? What is the context I can give them? And then the rest of most of the meeting is about how do you navigate or facilitate the team to go from this context to some sort of an ending that you're looking for. Maybe your end goal is a plan. Maybe it's between like two options. Whatever it is, like a prototype that has been reviewed and everyone feels forward, or whatever your end goal is. Like it's kind of, that's what I work backwards from, is like, oh, I want one to say thumbs up to this prototype. Well, what do I need to do to get them to that place where they feel confident saying thumbs up? And then the rest of it, you create choices, you make choices. And most of today, I want to talk about this diamond and how you can facilitate the diamond, because I think most of us like understand the context and the conclusion sort of idea. So I'm going to dive a little bit into this, how to design, or how at least I design the diverge converge cycle, and then give you some examples of my meetings. And then I'll ask you all to think about an upcoming meeting that you have where you want to try this out. So I'd like, maybe we can do like a little 2-minute exercise first. So if you could think of sort of a meeting or a decision or some kind of that you feel like you could like redesign that meeting or redesign that process. So just look at your calendar, find a meeting that you want to like the shape of it, and just like take a piece of paper and write the name of your meeting on top and draw this little diamond shape on it. So like a minute, maybe, or 2 minutes if you can start the music. And I'd love for you all to look at your calendar, find a meeting, draw this diamond on it, and then we can do a little bit of a discussion if needed, if there's any chat questions. So let's do 2 minutes on the timer first. Go. And when you're done, you can like just sort of say, I'm done, and we'll know when people are done. Just find a meeting, write the name of it, click I'm done.
One night in a disco on the outskirts of Frisco, I was cruising with my favorite gang. The place was so boring, filled with out-of-towners touring. I knew that it wasn't my thing. I really wasn't caring, but I felt my eyes staring at a guy who stuck out in the crowd. He had the kind of body that would shame Adonis, and a face that would make any man proud. Oh, what's wow? He's the greatest that's all.
All right.
Oh, what's wow? Oh, what's wow? He's the greatest that's all. Oh, what's wow?
On butter. I think I'm gonna have to find a way to include some of this. Is that your Spotify or is that just butter?
That is one of the many playlists you can embed as a tool inside Butter, and I can just kick them off whenever I fancy. I don't even have to create the playlist. Someone's created it for me. This one's called Groovy Tunes.
Oh, I love it. All right, so I can pause for a second if there is I don't see any questions in the chat. Yeah, feel free to type your questions in chat. But if anyone wants to voice over or ask any questions, we can pause for a second and then I can move on. If not. Okay, I don't see anyone unmuting. Okay, move on then. Yeah, please use the chat, yeah, in Butter. All right, so usually when I'm like designing a meeting, I'll start with the diamond and I'll write at the end, like, here's kind of my vision for where we want to be at the end. We want like a tested prototype, or we want to come up with like 5 improvements we can make to the product or whatever it is. Like that's what I sort of like, I'm in my diamond. And then throughout, and then the goal is to like go from this context at the beginning of the meeting all the way to the decision at the end. And these are sort of some of the steps that I sort of imagine as I start designing the path. What is the way in which I'm going to like sort of facilitate this group of people to be able to have a conversation that's like an ad hoc, but is organized and organized in a way that will actually move the discussion forward and move it forward in an inclusive and like structured format. So I'll start with each of these sections and maybe just share a little bit about a few examples of how I've done it. So at the beginning of the meeting, I talked about the context. So like, it's really important to provide context, whether it's a document or sometimes it's a presentation or a prototype, and hopefully it's less than 5 minutes. But the most important thing here that I think about at the beginning is you give people the context. What is the question you're going to ask them? Like, what is the question? What is the thing that you're going to ask them to trigger the divergence, to get input from everyone? And I think of this as the trigger question, and I think a lot about what is this question? I feel like it can set the tone for the meeting. And I know in sort of your world, you're probably thinking very deeply about questions and that you want to ask in a retrospective, for instance. So I know this is like this art of crafting a good question is probably a shared art between us. But I feel like I'm like always collecting questions. I'm always listening for what is a good question that gets people to provide people. And some of the ideas, some of the questions that I do a lot is go into strategy sessions. And when I go into like sort of business strategy or design strategy, product strategy sessions, I always like to start with like, this one is about what are our goals. So I ask people to get super optimistic and imagine that we build the best product possible ever. Like, what are we going to unlock? What new markets, what new customer needs are we going to fulfill? And then I ask people in the room to get let's get super pessimistic. What's going to stop us? Like, what are some of the key things that are going to stop us from achieving our goals? And I find that this framing of, again, like get super optimistic and get super pessimistic, I did not come up with this. I heard someone else use it and I thought it was really effective. But this kind of just framing of like, let's get super pessimistic. It really helps sort of get people in the mood to provide like really relevant inputs for your diverge site. So some questions that I like asking kind of over and over again: how might we fail? What options do we have to move forward? So a lot of times, like, people really love brainstorming problems, but it's really to think about how to move forward. So I like kind of, if I'm in a situation where I'm like, listen, this is a mess, or hey, OpenAI just dropped this amazing chat GPT, like we need to like have a response. What options do we have? Like, so just framing it positively can really help avoid some of the issues with just getting problems. Another thing that I've found quite useful in meetings, so a lot of times we give people a route of the research or readout of what happened, but we don't ask them like what was actually interesting about it, so on and so forth. So these are just some questions that I like to ask, but I mean, there's on the type of meeting you're having. So as you think about your meeting and you think just like very quickly, as you think about think about like, what what kinds of opinions or input are you looking from the group, and like how might you ask for it? So instead of just asking what do you think or what's your feedback, how can we be a little more intentional in the question that we ask? So and we can just do it in silence, but if you can like just think about your meeting and think about what is a way that you could tailor the type of responses you get in the meeting through your question. Maybe 5 more seconds. And I'll share them later if you want to think about it more. But yeah, so I think this really sets the tone for the meeting. Ask. And then sort of ideally the question gets you really rich, really users. And that's where the first step is usually to get responses in. And I like to do like silent responses for the first part. People can think they're thinking alone sometimes. And then so we allow them to think alone first, and then we synthesize together. And as we synthesize together, we start looking at what other people have said. And there's like a lot of power in this silent alone time initially to get really a rich, diverse set of ideas, avoid groupthink initially, get like as diverse ideas as possible. And then as you synthesize, and a lot of times I'll do this so very quietly without speaking. It's really cool because people can read at like the rate of 400 words a minute, but we only speak at the rate of, I think, 125 words a minute. So our brains work way faster than we speak. And even as I'm speaking now, your brains are working faster than I can speak. So you're probably like, that is why we sometimes are bored in meetings or like are thinking about other things, because we have like more brain power. And so doing all of this silently, the magic that happens when you see a lot of people reading each other's ideas and like building on top of it, and kind of creating new ideas, like it just, a lot can happen in silence on something like a Miro board. Of course, that's what I use, but kind of like whatever written format, I think even Google Docs I've seen work really, really well. So I like to start with silent brainstorming, give people a question, give them some space, and get like, you can say sticky sketches, images. So one example of this that I have from one of our teams that was working with our people team, and their weekly it's sort of stand up to help each other out, because all of these team members were working pretty individually across our different hubs, across our different geographic hubs. And so they would kind of they had like, they would share their KR work and non-KR work on this board as images. And I think even just like have people to individually reflect, like just created some, like we could never go around and have each person speak in the same amount of time that we could have them put an image up and have everyone read it.
Just want to highlight, there's a question that's been raised up.
Yeah.
Joris, over to you.
Yeah, hello, you hear me good?
Yeah.
Yep.
Hello, I have a question. So I'm very curious, when you mentioned that you start in silence and then all of a sudden all people can synthesize what they read or saw visually. So my question goes very specific to the whole purpose of decision making is to make sure that everybody is aligned in the end. So if everybody is silent and they give some visual inputs and then you synthesize, where is the step where people understand the same thing of what they see? Because if I read words, I interpret it totally different probably than the person who wrote it. And if you have 7 people in the room, where is again the tool to make sure that if people communicate that they understand the same thing? Because even the words mean different things. Even a visual can be interpreted differently. So how do you make the step from silence to shared understanding? And then the next step would be aligning, agreeing on how do you want to make choices. But if they have so much interpretation, my question is, what are you doing to make sure that people have a good feeling that they are moving in the same direction instead of in all directions?
Yeah. Okay, that's such a great question. So let's focus on the framework for a bit. So what I suggest and what I like generally do is like spend about like 50% of the time here in a meeting. And this seems like a lot of, and you're right, like in this silent, diverging period, it's like very uncomfortable. And people do use the same words for different things. And there is benefit to that, because when people are using same words for different ideas, or when people have like completely different ideas for how to solve the same problem, same context, actually what it shows is that there's like different underlying assumptions. And so this part of diverging, I will say, is like very uncomfortable. It feels like you're going nowhere. Sometimes it can feel like a big waste of time, right? Because normally what we want to do, what I've seen happen in meetings, is you diverge a little bit, you have like 2 ideas, 2 people speak up, you quickly make like a decision, and then the rest of the meeting is just like talking about that decision. And we feel really good about this because it feels like we're in alignment, right? And that's kind of usually, I would say, how most product decisions are made. One person, you've already made the decision before the meeting, you come in, you like listen to one idea, and very quickly you start to feel like, yeah, we're aligned. But a lot of the times, like those don't like really, and it's very clear, like they don't lead to like actual either innovative decisions or decisions where everyone is actually aligned, like people nod along, but in their heart of hearts, people don't feel heard and don't feel fully committed to the decision. So that's why I suggest, like for those decisions that where you kind of really want to get your team involved, like you have like this big divergence phase and it's really uncomfortable. And then you start to converge. Once and it should feel, if it hasn't felt, you haven't diverged enough, and you haven't really looked for those kind of like liar risks or ideas. And then you kind of, after you've kind of felt that discomfort, I think in the synthesis and the discussion phase, we start converging. So we do end up discussing, but by the time we discuss, we already have like some sort of a framework of the ideas. So by this, I mean, already done an affinity map or a journey map or a mind map. And there may be some sporadic conversations here, but for the most part, a lot of this can be done in silence as well. And then we discuss, and again, with the discussion, we're trying to get a sense of what is interesting. So there's a lot of stuff that was created. Most of it is going to be trash that we're not going to look at ever again. So, but we need to create all of those things in order to find the 2 or 3 very interesting things. And that's where something like a heat map. So with, what I mean by that is, I just have people put dots on ideas that seem interesting. And then we go ahead and we start discussing, okay, I see a lot of dots here. What was interesting about this? So again, like, it's just giving people time to think, time to absorb before they speak. So they're not thinking about what they want to say as they speak. They've taken the time to absorb it. By the time they speak, they have a fully opinion or thought that they can share with the group that's rich. So in terms of your question of when do we start actually converging, this is where we start doing a heat map, and you'll start seeing, oh, you liked, maybe somebody liked something about this that nobody else understood, right? And then once that person speaks, you see other people saying, okay, this is like actually really interesting, I didn't see that. And so like that understanding begins to, heat mapping is one way, round robin discussion where you ask each kind of what's most interesting, what's most viable. There's like many ways to facilitate this. But I always make sure the decider speaks last, because they can really move the discussion, I think, very quickly in a different direction. So what I want to do is not to have them speak last, but to have them listen first. I want them each and every perspective so they can make the most informed, if they can provide the most informed voice. And then we start to, of the common things that we probably know, do some voting. I don't look at voting as a democratic, people vote and you just choose the ones with the highest vote. I don't think that's how the actual decisions work. So with voting, my perspective is you do a democratic vote, you always get like a perspective of where's the heart of this room after we've had this with people who have like very thoughtful ideas. What is the room thinking? And you can do a regular voting or 2 by 2. I sometimes will use something like a scoring matrix to get a sense of where's the room. Red, yellow, yes, no, depends obviously again on the context of the meeting. And the voting is just an input in my mind for the decider. So I think the decider should always have like the last, and they have, in my mind, a super vote. They need to be able to look at all of this discussion, absorb it, and make the most informed sort of path forward. And once, I think there is a lot of alignment and a lot of confidence that happens once you have sort of the decider in the room say, listen, I've heard the risks, but really for the business, we need to try and do this. And I think we have like permission to go and try this highly risky idea. So I think there's a lot of confidence that can come. So I always think of, it's not like a government, like we're not trying to do a democratic vote. The decider has the most, they should make the final decision. So maybe it'll be helpful to see an example of a meeting. So this is, this was a company, I'll go through this really quickly. This was a company that had sort of, it's a company that makes bikes. So they make bicycles, bicycles that you ride, but their innovation was that their bicycles could be shipped. So they could be packed in a flat box like IKEA did with furniture, it could be packed in a flat box, and it could be shipped to you. So what they found was they had a problem where like about 25% of their bicycles were being reported as damaged during shipping, which was obviously a big business problem. Sometimes, in the traditional world, you might go to a VP of operations and tell them, oh, 25% of our bikes are being reported damaged. And they would just say, okay, let's change the packaging, or let's make the packaging more, let's put more stuffing in the packaging or whatever. And then you would just do that. But instead, what this team did was they wanted a more innovative solution. So they ran a workshop that has some of the concepts that I told you. So first, they asked a good trigger question. 25% of bicycles are reported damaged. Why is that? And during silent brainstorming, people were able to, let me click out of here so you can see my Miro board. People were able to brainstorm. Okay, maybe it's damaged in our warehouse. Is it damaged during shipping? Cut this up because of the 100% refund policy. So they were just brainstorming all the reasons why this could happen. And it was all silent. And once we could then decide, oh, okay, let's, where, we could move things around, and we could like sort of add more things. We could synthesize ideas. And then after that, we did a little dot voting heat map within the room. So we had people from the warehouse, we had people from customer support, and they dot voted. And, you can see that most people thought it was damaged during shipping because couriers didn't think bikes were delicate. Bikes, we don't think of bikes as delicate. We think of TVs and computers as delicate. And so the decider, I always have a big pink vote for the decider. We did ask the decider, we're like, okay, we're going to spend like 3 weeks trying to solve a problem. Do you agree that this is the problem we should be solving? And the decider said, yes, I agree. Let's try and solve this problem. And then they did so and so forth. We prompt couriers to it. They did some brainstorming. We did analysis of these ideas. And in Miro, something that you can do is you can cluster ideas so it can find what are the common themes. But with a lot of, you can do this yourself manually. You can try and find the themes. And then for voting and prioritization, we used a 2x2. So we were like, okay, which of these ideas might work? So there were a lot of like ideas here, but they had one idea, which was like, let's write delicate on the parcel. This one crazy idea was to put a picture of a TV on the parcel, even though they weren't shipping TVs. They were like, why don't we just put a picture of a TV? People are used to like handling TVs delicately. And there were some ideas that were very high cost, like make it really heavy so it's hard to throw about, or change our shipping partner. These were all pretty high cost ideas. So this team decided, what if we just try this? Let's just try this like random idea, but it's like low cost. It's like, let's just try. And it's like a real story. They did try it, and it reduced their by about like 80% reduction. So when I'm talking about sort of this idea of like doing some silent brainstorming, it's about like maybe finding those ideas, finding those directions that may not be first or second ideas that you come up with, but giving it enough uncomfortable diverging time to allow for all of these different perspectives to provide input. Okay, I'll stop. I know that was very long response, but that's sort of like the shape of the meeting, is to spend more time diverging than you think you need. I'll pause for. So actually synthesis, it does need to be done as a group, like as a group start moving things around. For synthesis, I'll usually have some idea of like what to look like. So whether it's an affinity map, a mind map, a journey map, I like to kind of beforehand putting those ideas in the map.
Any other question, if it's okay? Where do you see the difference between diverging and emerging? Because you can have, as you mentioned, a few crazy ideas, but how do people build further upon the ideas that it becomes, I don't know, maybe more innovative, as you can not have a final focus point because you can emerge till the infinity or something like that? Where do you see the difference?
Yeah, I mean, it's really an art science. Like, I think this synthesis, when ideas get combined and people will come up with more ideas. Sometimes pausing here overnight is really interesting and seeing what people come back with the next morning. So it really depends on how much you need the team to innovate versus not. Like, you know, like if it's sort of a big new project, yeah, maybe spend a little bit of cycles on being sort of, of having people put things together. And then an exercise I like to do in design sprints is something we call analogous inspiration. So we go out into the world and look for inspiration. So when you look at like most innovative ideas, they usually combine two things that already exist in the world, but like in a new way. So Netflix, very easy example. You have DVDs, you had the postal service, they like combined them. But then also if you think of, you know, the rolling suitcase, right? A rolling suitcase, very common thing. Wheels had been around for thousands of years. Boxes in trunks had been around for hundreds of years before someone like thought together and make a rolling suitcase. So what I like to do, if you're trying to do like extremely emergent ideation, let the team like just go out in the world and look for inspiration, like look at nature, look at just like objects from a first principles perspective. And I'm happy to like share some of the design activities you can do to get that analogous inspiration going.
Thank you.
Sorry, I don't know if you wanted to go there, but there's ways to do it. Yeah. But I guess as a facilitator, at some point you just kind of, you know, point of view. So we only have like 10 minutes left. You know, I wanted to ask you all, maybe if you all will play with me, like just based on sort of some of the things that we talked about today, is in sort of your upcoming meeting, something that feels like, you know, something that you want to try giving meeting. And I want you to, this is a Miro board, but I thought it would be fun to try this with you. But maybe take 2 minutes to reflect that you want to try differently. And if you scan this QR code from your phone, just use your phone, QR code, you can send me a sticky on this Miro board. So if there's anything that you want to try as part of Miro, or just like in terms of process, you can kind of, let's take like 2 minutes, and maybe would love to hear your what you want at next meeting. I'll drop the link, Momo. Maybe Chris, maybe we can do like a little bit of a music for
some tunes. Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, while people are adding. Yeah.
By the way, it has the ability to adjust the music volume to their needs. If you need a bit of silence to reflect, then feel free to adjust accordingly. right, how we doing?
Yeah, let's take a look at what came up. I just wanted to also just share there's different ways to get input from the audience. So I love this QR Stickies app. It's on, I think it literally we in the Miro marketplace today. So try it out. If you all are Miro, there's a few things you can do for the state. I mean for all the states, but in this top middle toolbar. Since you all like the clustering thing, I just wanted to point out we now have private mode, and then we have this Miro that I use. Helps to get that going. It's a few. Well, yeah. Thanks for your thought of what. Interesting. The first level decider. Interesting. Yeah, definitely try clustering in Miro. I guess the one thing I wanted to address is Hugh's question from the chat, where Hugh, you're asking about the designated challenger. I think there is a problem. I think we have a lot of sort of US, and you tell me about other parts of the world, but at least in the US, I find a lot of sort of positive, a lot of positivity in meetings. People are really positive. They align really quickly. And I think it's all just basically groupthink. People are not comfortable, or they're not maybe sometimes invested enough to try and think of a new way of doing it or an alternative. And so this idea of a designated challenger or devil's advocate is interesting. It's not something I use in my meetings. I think it can be a disservice to the person that you're designating as a challenger, but maybe in some teams that can work. Is include during the meeting questions such as, what are we missing? Fail. So include questions that really prompt the group as a whole to think about what are our blind spots today. But again, I'm not opposed to a designated challenger. Another role that I've found personally useful, if I'm facilitating a room where I don't know the people very well, is to have an ally. So someone that I build a relationship with before the meeting, especially in a high stakes meeting. I like to have an ally in the room that's an in person, someone that's in with the group that I'm facilitating. And that I used to see that a lot in my role as an external facilitator, where I needed an ally, and that ally would help mirror me, or would help kind of amplify what I was saying. So yeah, there are definitely other roles. Yeah. Any other questions, you guys? Okay, amazing. Well, we're at time. I'll share my Miro board, but how about I share it here? And then I'll share it via Chris as well. So thanks. Amazing. Yeah, thanks for coming. I hope that was that gave you some ideas and to be a little more uncomfortable as you run your meetings. Over to you, Chris.
I'm a huge fan of what I call reverse brainstorming techniques when I'm doing any sort of facilitation. I used it today, in fact. I was running a workshop, a half-day workshop, and at the beginning, I said to everyone, hey, how could this be the worst workshop for you?
Yeah.
And by getting those things down right at the beginning of that workshop, I knew what to avoid. It had things like, not having enough breaks, being monotonous and repetitive, not including interaction, all those things that I knew anyway, to be honest, because I'm pretty good at what I do. But it's good to get those things down early, and then you can navigate them. If there was something brand new I hadn't thought of, great. Well, I can keep an eye on that. There might be particular needs of someone that I wasn't aware of that I might be able to accommodate. So those reverse brainstorming techniques can be a great way of getting the conversation going. We do have a negativity bias. We do focus more on the negatives than the positives. And it can be a bit of fun too. The world's worst retro template, James has highlighted, is one of mine that I've created. And it's just how do we kill the product? How do we make it the worst launch possible? How do we reduce our collaboration as a team? How do we make our work more siloed? How do we make work less fun for us? All these things can be a great way to get the conversation going.
Totally. I love those as like really good questions to start the conversation.
Well, folks, that is it. If there's no more questions for Shipra, we will end things here. We have a couple more interesting sessions coming up for you in a few weeks' time. We've got Michael Lloyd, Dysfunction Mapping. We have Artur Marganari at the end of March. We've got Jim Highsmith, one of the Agile Manifesto co-creators. In April, we've got something like another 7 events lined up already. So do check out Meetup. Look for the ones that you might find interesting. You've experienced using Butter today. That's one of our sponsors, so do check them out. It's a great tool for engaging, facilitating. It makes it a bit more streamlined and intuitive. And our other sponsor is Agile Testing Day. It's a great conference in Germany. I'm speaking there at the end of November. So if you are based in Europe, if you're looking about Agile and testing, then do check that out. Thank you for everyone's engagement. Thank you again, Shipra. Do take a moment to give some reactions. The soundboard is now enabled, folks, which gives you all these fancy little buttons that you can press that makes lots of sound to show your appreciation for Shipra and her session today. As an example, this one feels quite happy. There we go. Awesome. Thank you, folks. Have a great evening. Thank you, Shipra. Bye-bye. See you all next time.